circle. I was doing work, sitting in the cul-de-sac, contemplating murder. Swerving with my circus, looking for a purpose. Pseudo clean record, hope got another surface.
All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of Culpers Canteen Cup. We really appreciate you guys tuning in and taking time out of your busy day to listen to us. And we got some feedback from our last episode, and Luke's going to cover that real quick and throw it out there, and we'll take a few minutes and cover the last episode with a question, and before we get into to today's. Luke?
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, we got, like you said, we got some really good feedback, and more than one source of feedback, too. I want to, tell Ryan thanks for his comments, and we can get into some of those in the future. And we just recently got some feedback from Bonnie and her husband as really positive stuff. And we really thank her for that. And if anyone wants to get on the Facebook site and read what she wrote, that's exactly what the kind of feedback we want. What do you want to hear? What do you want us to go deeper into? What did you not like? So on and so forth. But there was one question in particular from an ROTC cadet named Robert. I'm not going to say his last name. For fear of maybe getting him in trouble. He's going to be an infantry officer real soon. He's a bright kid. He's commissioning in May. And he listened to the first and second podcast, and he was impressed, I guess you could say, on the news sources we had, how we knew where to go and what to do. I'll just read what he wrote. I'd love to hear y'all's perspective on how the average person should go about taking in and analyzing all the information that's being put out every day. What rings true? What rings false, stuff like that. Now, that's not an easy question for me to answer because I've spent a long time getting to know my news sources and things like that. It took me a long time to get to a point where I can kind of sift through that. So I'm going to kick it over to Roger, who might have a little bit better answer than I can give. Roger, you got anything?
Yeah, good afternoon, Robert. Thanks for the question. And, before I begin, thanks for your service. I hope you have a long and successful career. I tell you, as far as, this is what I tell my kids. So I have 3 kids. I have one that's a grown up and a full, grown adult out in the workforce, family. I have one that's a senior in college, and then I have one that's getting ready to graduate high school. And they ask very similar questions like, Dad, you always have something else, besides what you see on TV, and there's always more to it. And, where do you get it from, and how do you know what to trust, and what are some of your sources? And so this is the way, me personally, and I think we all do it differently, but me personally, the number one thing that I think is missed, and it's just due to the changing in times and the 24-hour news cycle. One, know the difference between an editorial and news. So I'm a huge Fox News guy, all right? And I'll tell you, just to put it out there, I think we're all somewhat in the middle. We veer a little left, veer a little right, but we're kind of in the middle. I know as far as like social issues, I'm more of a libertarian. I really don't give a shit what you do in your house as long as it's in your house and doesn't impact me. But as far as, the economy and fiscally, I'm more of a fiscal conservative. So with that being said, I generally have Fox News on. But one of the things that you have to realize is that there's very little news that goes on, even in the 24-hour quote unquote news cycle. So when you're watching your Sean Hannitys and your Tucker Carlsons and the different programs that come on throughout the day, you have to realize that is an opinion program. Now, there are news pieces in there that they bring out, right? It's like the headline. So they'll have the headline that is generally factual, not a whole lot of context behind it, but then they are paid to provide their insights and opinions on the issues versus the actual news. So when I say actual news, and I think for some of the younger folk, it's a little tougher to relate, but I know for us three, us older folks, I remember at 5 o'clock at night, we'd eat dinner and it was the local news. And then I think it was like 6 or 7 that Dan Rather came on, right? And it was the world news. So number one, you have to differentiate between what's an editorial, what's opinion versus what is actual news. That right there is going to help you out a lot. The next thing I look at, check out the source, right? Is it Fox News? We know Fox News does lean to the right, generally speaking. Is it a CNN, MSNBC, the Huffington Post? So they all lean slightly left, slightly right. So that'll kind of give you some perspective where that piece is coming from. But more importantly, look inside of that. Look for the actual source of the content. It seems like nowadays, and I hear it with President Trump, because everybody's, I always say this with President Trump, whether you like him, love him, hate him, whatever. The man could cure cancer tomorrow, and people would bitch that he increased the world population. It led to global warming, and we're all going to melt. Okay, it doesn't matter what he does. So what I say is, look at the original content and try to go to that video, because I think most of the stuff that I see, you'll see the original links and what everybody does, right? It's the old, I take the one sentence out that I hate people. Well, okay, they cut it. And that, hey, he hates all people, everybody. You heard it, and they show it on TV. You heard it from the horse's mouth. And then it's going to be, I hate people that litter, right? So something we can all get behind. So, that's the second piece is, go to the original content, actually listen to the whole thing, read it. I think the latest thing was and actually somebody opened my eyes to it. It was the latest stimulus bill when they were talking about money for, Planned Parenthood and abortions and this and that. And I won't get into all that stuff, but I was kind of making the argument what I had heard off the news, off the media. And then I had a guy come on there and I was ready to go, right? Because I got Fox News on 24/7 and I do flip through MSNBC and CNN. I was like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to fire out this stuff. So I'm arguing back and forth, and he was leading me down this path. And I at the end of the day, I was like, touche, man, you got me. Because and that was a hard pill to swallow, because I think we're all very prideful, right? Especially with what we think we know. But he comes back and he's like, hey, did you actually read the bill? I'm like, nope, never read the bill. All like 94 pages of it, right? So and he was, I can't remember his name. He was super, super cool about it. But like, here, puts it up there, cuts and pastes. Here you go. Here's the bill. Now this guy had way more time than I do. I actually have a day job. So he went in, was like, highlighted a couple of things, read through this, pulled out the drafts. And at the end of the day, I was like, man, you're right. Believe it or not, what I did see on Fox News or Tucker Carlson or whatever I got it from was wrong. So, at that point, I have to remind myself, hey, go to the original source of the information, whether it's the video, whether it's the memo, whether it's the bill. And then, finally, for me, you got to read a variety of sources. I don't want to plug anybody in specific, in particular, but I have several different, Luke, I know we've talked about it several times. I have several different, news aggregators, because what they'll do is they'll take the topic and they will present 8 or 9 different sources for that topic. So you'll see everything from the New York Times to the LA Times, Washington Post. You'll see left, right, a little bit in between. So you can kind of read all the different perspectives. And then from there, right, make your own call on what you believe and what you've read. So that's kind of my take. That's how I do it. Josh, I don't know if you have something to add to that, or maybe something a little bit different that you do on your end.
No, I pretty much do the same thing, right? You take a look, which news sources, lean which way. After a while, it's fine. Even some of the overseas, news sources coming out of other countries, you take a look at them, and, there's two sides of every story. The truth is always generally somewhere in the middle. It's fine. Now, and you bring up a great point of, pointing out that a lot of what we see today, those are opinion pieces, right? Those are editorial. That is not news, right? That is not the Woodward and Bernstein, investigative reporting, that's going on. And unfortunately, we live in a 240 character world country where people don't go any deeper than the headline or, that tweet that they read. The biggest thing that you have to be careful about is, like, there's some crazy shit out there. Like, there's some absolute crazy shit out there in the news that can take you down some very, very dark and deep rabbit holes, right? And so, and then you become one of those people, like, you either way on the far right or you are way on the far left, because you truly believe that, the DNC generated the virus to whittle down the senior, citizen population, typically because that demographic generally, votes conservative and votes Republican. Right. And so that's just one of that's one of the crazy headlines that I've seen, in the last few weeks while, the more extreme people are talking about COVID-19, and I know there's a bunch of others, out there. So I know you guys have seen them. Luke, what's your favorite one that you've seen so far?
My favorite one. I don't want to spoil the party because I think Roger wants to say this one. I hope. If you don't say it, Roger, I'm gonna motion for you guys to come back to me. But right now, I think my favorite, most ridiculous one is the 5G. The 5G that's going up around the world is either causing or contributing to the rapid spread of COVID-19. And even Woody Harrelson, Woody from Cheers, Natural Born Killers, True Detective, even he got in on that. And he had a long statement. He's like, I've read this. And he actually said this. He said, I haven't fully vetted it yet. Thanks, Woody. Thanks. Yeah, I'd like to know how you vet your sources. And this may be another topic for another podcast. But, I saw this 5G story in Birmingham, England. They're actually, burning down cell towers there, 5G towers. And it's just, that's out of hand. But at the same time, the media feels like they need to go to the esteemed Woody Harrelson to get his opinion. And somehow that lends credibility. It's unbelievable to me that somehow a Hollywood star has to, we have to hear from them to lend credibility. So that's probably one of my most ridiculous favorites, I guess you could call it. And the other one is the cocaine cure. I saw an article on that. If you snort cocaine, it'll sterilize your nostrils so that you don't have to worry about the COVID. That one's kind of fun. But I'm going to kick it over to Roger. I hope you say the one I hope you say the one I'm thinking.
Well, first of all, let me backtrack a little bit. So obviously today's episode is about conspiracy theories. All right. So let me, I pulled this off the good old Gurgle there, and you Gurgle conspiracy theory, and it's a theory that rejects the standard explanation for an event and instead credits a covert group or organization with carrying out a secret plot. 2, a belief that a particular unexplained event was caused by such a covert group. And 3, the idea that many important political events or economic and social trends are the products of deceptive plots that are largely unknown to the general public. So I think the key word there in a lot of this, it's a belief or a theory, as opposed to, I guess for a lack of a better term, an agenda. These are folks that actually believe these explanations that are outside of the norm, or actually believe something other than the standard, generation or explanation. The 5G thing. So I tell you a couple of things with that. One, you hit it spot on with Woody Harrelson, because I would tell you this. I am sick and tired. It reminds me of LeBron James talking about China, right? We all know about all that stuff and playing overseas and this. I could give two shits what LeBron James fucking thinks about China, all right, and our policy over in China. Really could care less. One, Jordan was the greatest and will always be the greatest, so he's just wrong right there. But two, Lord. I mean, the guy, now, hey, he wants to come over and teach my son how to play basketball. Rock and roll, dude. I'll be out there with a videotape and taking lessons, right? But as far as, his take on China, and not just him, I pick on him, but, any of the movie stars, actors, half my friends, my family, it's like, hey, if you don't have some type of, firsthand experience, knowledge, working knowledge, or research or something, I mean, a lot of it I just don't really care. It's like what I guess they may say the same thing about us, right? So it's what really gives us the the ability to see her. But I'd like to think that we do a little bit more research, a little bit more digging, and I want to believe that we're a little bit unbiased. Now, on to your second thing with the 5G. So what I've gone through the last couple of days looking at conspiracy theories, and I'll tell you right off the bat. So you've got some of the big ones, right? The biggest one out there is probably the JFK assassination. You've got 9/11, the Twin Towers, coming down, the plane, and obviously the Pentagon. You've got Area 51. You've got the moon landing. You've got the Flat Earth Society that has, members all around the globe. Not sure how that works out. And then you've got the old secret societies with, the Illuminati, Masons, Skull and Bones, or whatever. But what I do realize with a lot of these things is that there is usually a smidgen of truth. And we're not talking about Obama's smidgen of corruption or lack of, but there usually is a kernel of truth somewhere in there. And then from there, it gets all spun out of hand, right? So when you look at your 5G, there actually is a smidgen of truth with that, where, I think there's two competing theories, or as far as the conspiracy theorists go. One, that 5G actually, and coronavirus is actually a symptom of 5G. So you are next to a 5G tower, and hey, now I've got coronavirus because I'm next to one. And the funny thing about that is our town, so I live in a small town out in Arizona. And believe it or not, somebody actually posted that on our town page. And one of and I shit you not, I sat there, I'm like, really? But, cool on the town council, because they came back and it was pretty accusatory. Hey, we're going to get coronavirus, 5G towers. And then, our town councilman was pretty cordial. Was like, we don't have 5G towers here. And it's like, oh, all right, whatever. But when you actually look into the studies of 5G, I do think that there is some type of impact to us as people and individuals, and there may be, and this goes into the second one, where it reduces your your immune system, right? It compromises your immune system, so you're more susceptible to coronavirus or anything else. And I would tell you, not specifically coronavirus, but there might be something there to that. And I say that, so I pulled up this article. It's an opinion piece, but it's by Joel Moskowitz. But anyway, he goes in and he cites a lot of studies and this and that. And I'll just read you the first couple paragraphs, and I'll kind of leave it there and throw it out there for conversation. So this is talking about specifically 5G. The telecommunications industry and their experts have accused many scientists who have researched the effects of cell phone radiation of fear-mongering over the advent of wireless technologies, 5G. Since much of our research is publicly funded, and he's talking about his group, we believe it is our ethical responsibility to inform the public about what the peer-reviewed scientific literature tells us about the health risks from wireless radiation. The chairman of the FCC recently announced through a press release that the commission will soon reaffirm the radio frequency radiation exposure limits that the FCC adopted in the late 1990s. All right, so they're going to say that what we used back in the 1990s, that's the same that we're going to use today, the same standard. These limits are based upon a behavioral change in rats exposed to microwave radiation and were designed to protect us from short-term heating risks due to RFR exposure. Yet, since the FCC adopted these limits based largely on research from the 1980s, the preponderance of peer-reviewed research, more than 500 studies have found harmful biological health effects, yada, 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 right? So there is some correlation there, obviously, with being exposed. And I think the second biggest thing is that when you look at 5G, okay, it employs millimeter waves the first time in addition to microwaves that have been used in 2G and 3G and 4G technologies. Given the limited reach, 5G will require cell antennas every 100 to 200 meters, exposing many people to millimeter wave radiation. So that brings you back to the conspiracy theory, and then you start saying, and I'd like to think I'm, fairly logical, get middle of the road, and I'm like, you know what? I could actually buy that because, take it to an extreme. We've all seen the cell towers, this and that around there. Do I want a cell tower next door to my house? No, probably not. Why is that? Well, there's probably a little bit of truth to this because just like everything except for, whiskey, anything, outside of moderation, too much, too extreme, right, is bad for you. So that's kind of my take on the 5G thing. And I do think with the cocaine thing, right, just for a second, I think there is some truth to that because, they are starting to come out now with the whiskey. They're like, hey, man, if you drink whiskey every day, you are basically sterilizing your mouth. So you reduce the chances that you catch coronavirus by like 75%.
Josh, you need to give a disclaimer here real quick about
the whiskey.
That's statistically factual. Right, from my own studies, peer review.
Right. The whiskey has to be a certain proof, right? So you're not going to be able to pull out your, don't go grab your dad's, 1973 bottle of Jack out of that decanter that has been sitting in for 3 decades, and think that 80 something proof is going to that 90 proof is going to help you. You got to get up there a little bit higher. The one disclaimer I'll throw out there is we are absolutely in no way, shape, or form advocating that you go and abuse cocaine. Yes, I don't think Tony Montana can be classified as a small business. So do not go support your local drug dealer. They are not a valid small business. So the 5G thing though, like, as far as like it causing coronavirus or transmitting coronavirus, like I think that's completely 100% absurd. I will say on the 5G thing, I think at a certain point, like we do need to take a hard look at it before we go throwing up towers every 200 meters. So 5G operates in the 30 gigahertz range, right? And so to put some perspective on that, your TV and your mobile AM FM radio, if you remember back in the day when we were growing up, right? You had your little AM FM radio that you had to turn the dial and you had to get the antenna just right. to pick up a clear signal, like those are down in the 30 kilohertz range, right? So we're past that. We're coming up to 30 gigahertz, and we're brushing up against the side of, microwaves and satellites, right? So would you want a microwave, basically strapped to your head, or a couple inches from your face, for hours and hours a day while it runs and works? I'm good, man. I don't have a lot of brain cells as it is. I need to conserve the ones I do have. So I'm not I think some more research needs to be done on 5G before we start going and slapping it up there. So that's my thoughts on the 5G piece.
Yeah, I think that's my big thing is, more studies. So, as far as the coronavirus, I think that's it's a little nuts. It's a little out there. And I think going back to Luke, what I think you were originally asking me. So when we talk about conspiracy theories in general, right, this one kind of is a little close to me. And it's sometimes I just don't get it. It's the anti-vaxxers, right? The anti-vaxxers, and that. So one, I want to know, I actually want somebody to comment, and I'm serious now. I'm not joking. Okay, I'm joking a little bit, but seriously, I want a comment from an anti-vaxxer. So what do they think about this whole COVID-19 thing? I mean, what is their thought process with this? Is we shouldn't be working out a vaccine, right? Or no, this one here is actually, I think, a little deadlier than the others, and maybe I should start looking at this whole vaccine thing so I don't die tomorrow type thing. So, I think with I've got this whole thing printed out where they talk about, the 1, 2, 3, 4, it's 10, 15 different vaccines that we take and the anti-vaxxers. And it's actually pretty close to me because I have an extended family member who is an anti-vaxxer. And, part of, I think, what makes us who we are, I think we do try to see the other side. I mean, we're obviously not right with everything. And, I love to be educated on. So I've actually tried to have a conversation on hey, walk me through this thought process. Because a lot of times, especially in the Army, right, it's the dumb Joe that screwed up. It's the, hey, you know what? I don't necessarily agree with what you did, but as long as you can walk me through some steps and kind of take me down to how you made that decision, I may not agree with what you did, but I see how you got there. And I've yet to have this, be able to have this conversation because I want to, and she's got a child, and I think the child is 18 months or so. And I'm just please, for the love of anything that you believe in, get this child vaccinated.
Oh, no. I want Karen to pack up all of her essential oils, put them in her reusable grocery bag, and I want her to head on down to the hospital, and I want her to go in and start treating COVID-19 patients with her fucking lavender oil, right? No, the anti-vaxxers, guess what, man? You get to go to the back of the line. You're the last one that gets tested for coronavirus, right? No, the anti-vaxxers are absolutely insane. There are literally places where polio and measles are making a legitimate comeback. It's we literally eradicated these things off the face of the earth, and people who think that, again, their lavender oil and their sunflower seeds are going to protect you against, polio. It is absolutely insane. The anti-vaxxers kill me. And generally they're the same ones that turn around and be like, no, it's science. It's proven by science that the Earth's climate is changing. It's okay, well, you believe that science, but you don't believe vaccine science. I don't get it.
So with the anti-vaxxer stuff, I know there's a movement. I don't follow it real close. And when I say I don't follow it real close, I'm saying I don't understand their problem. And I'm assuming I read some articles on it years back because some stuff I just had to flush down the toilet. I don't have room in my mind to contemplate anti-vaxxers. But I think I read an article a few years back saying that some of the preservatives or something cause autism or something like that. And that's one of their deals and why they don't want to do it. Now, as you said, Roger, there's always a kernel of truth to something. Now, whether it's we become better at diagnosing autism or whether we now recognize what it was, whereas they didn't, in the 1900s, early 1900s, I don't know. But there could, people could see a correlation there. So I guess my question to you, back to Roger, is that their problem? Is it because of the link to autism, or is it some kind of epidemiological thing?
So I'm actually going to have to post this thing on our Facebook page because it's a pretty good read. And this guy kind of goes down, he covers all the vaccines, and there's this other guy who, he's always, I guess he's one of the leaders of the group. And, as far as the anti-vaxxers go, and he says, hey, these are 9 questions that, those that support vaccines can't answer. And he basically takes each one, boom, boom, boom. And I mean, it's just, even not doing the research on your own, you see, it's like, wow, this is pretty. So, going to your question about the autism thing. So this is where this comes from. And I feel kind of bad. And this actually goes back to, Robert's question as far as, news, right? Where do you get your news from and how do you know what to believe? So this is talking specifically about measles, mumps, and rubella. So some of the anti-vax movement claim that the MMR has had mercury in it. However, the MMR vaccines never had mercury in it. I think it did have some aluminum in it, and they say that's for more the preservative to make sure nothing else comes in. It doesn't really treat anything. It's just a preservative or whatever. So the basis of the MMR vaccine causes autism argument is a flawed study retracted by the Lancet on February 2nd, 2010 by Andrew Wakefield, who had several ethics breaches, including failure to disclose financial compensation from a lawyer representing families claiming MMR caused their children's autism, failure to disclose financial interest in the patents for MMR alternatives, failure to include data which contradicted his conclusions, use of contaminated samples to support his conclusions. Furthermore, it gives a date. Wakefield and 2 of his co-authors, John Angus Walker-Smith and Simon Harry Murch, were found by the UK's General Medical Council to have acted irresponsibly, dishonestly, and not in the clinical interests of the children involved in the study. So with this all, I won't bore you with the rest of it, but what it all boils down to is, you had some folks out there that, as a PR stunt or as revenue or whatever, they lied. I mean, they just straight out lied, right? And you know how the news cycle is nowadays. You always catch the first part of the news cycle, but who follows on? It's always like, hey, the New York Times, you were wrong. So what happens? Well, what happens is Friday afternoon, because the news cycle stopped, Friday afternoon on page, 4,623 at the bottom left-hand side, it's like, yeah, we were incorrect in this statement. We'll work to fix this later. And I think my thought process is when this was all going on, because this happened in 2010, this stuff comes out. So, as a child, right, or if you have a child, you're thinking, whoa, hey, these guys are going to court. I mean, there are studies here, right? Clinical studies. So now they're not conclusive yet, but, as a parent, I'd say, maybe I need to dig into this a little bit more. Maybe I need to talk to my doctors a little bit more because, we all know the government's not completely transparent with everything, right? So that's kind of that kernel of truth, but they failed to follow up on the story, continue to track it, and I didn't know either until I Googled it. I mean, I'm obviously a vaccine supporter, but I didn't know about all of this until I Googled it, and it was like, oh yeah, this dude was a complete fraud. He lied about it, So I feel bad in a sense to some of the anti-vaxxers, but I'll kick it back over to Josh. What I do want to do is definitely get this thing posted on our Facebook page because it's a pretty short read, but the 9 questions that this guy says, hey, you got to ask every person who supports vaccine. I mean, he goes through and he debunks it all, and I'll just leave it out there for the broader audience to read it and consume it, how they need to.
Well, we got to make sure our internet Facebook moderator is okay with that, first, Roger, because, that guy's obviously trying to force us out, but I'll go ahead and let Josh talk. Sorry.
We're being censored as we speak. Hey man, I'm just trying to create efficiencies and division of labor. Just trying to help you guys out. And so like on the conspiracy theories about vaccines. Right. So that's obviously you're getting into epidemiology, right? And there's some scientific arguments to be made in there, right? And so I'm willing to have that conversation on some of those that are based on science, right? Because people are like, no, science is science. At the end of the day, it's like lawyers. I can find 2 different scientists, and I'm going to get 10 different opinions, right? So I tell you, the one conspiracy theory that I absolutely refuse to have a conversation on, I absolutely refuse to engage with, and I've even unfriended people literally in my life because of this one. When people who think that the United States government perpetrated 9/11, right? That automatically sets my blood boiling. It automatically gets me going. And I literally, I want to cause physical bodily harm to that individual. And here's why. There's two main reasons why, right? The first one being, all three of us have, we've been in the government, the government bubble for over 2 decades, each of us, right? And, like anybody who thinks that the U.S. government, one, is that intelligent and that sophisticated that it could pull off something like that without it getting out, is woe be to them, right? I'm telling you right now, the government's not that competent. They can't do shit like that, right? The government is largely inept. And number two, right, to think back to like when we were in SEER school, you have that faith, right? You're in captivity. You have faith that the U.S. government is doing everything in its power to secure your release, right? When you sit there and you tell the American people that the government murdered almost 3,000 of its citizens just so we could go to war with Afghanistan, just so we could go to war with Iraq, for oil. One, Afghanistan don't have fucking oil. All right. For those of you who failed geography class, and most of you couldn't find Afghanistan on a map until after 9/11, so you can go ahead and take a seat in the back. And number two, you can't tell me, you can't even point out on a map of Iraq where the Kirkuk oil fields are and the Ramallah oil fields are. So you can go sit in the back with the people who can't find Afghanistan on a map, right? To be at that point where you don't have the faith in your government, like the machine breaks down. I don't know how people can function, right? At that point, when you walk around in a world where you think, yeah, man, my government will murder 3,000 people just to get what it wants. The machine breaks down, right? And society breaks down, and the machine breaks down. And hey, man, Barnes said it in the movie Platoon. He ain't gonna allow the machine to break down. The machine can't break down. And that's the one conspiracy theory that I will not engage any discussion on. Like, I won't entertain it. And I will literally fucking cut those people out of my life permanently. Right. So anyway, I didn't mean to get on my soapbox. Like that one.
It's actually funny though. It's actually funny because my kids, especially my son, who said he's a senior in high school, he's just started asking about that stuff now. And he's like, Dad, what do you think about 9/11? And, I just sit there and I look at him. I'm just like, and he's like, yeah, I've got buddies that are saying this. And I'm like, they're fucking morons, bud. I just I'll fill you in on it, but they're idiots. There are some things that, you just can't take to heart. And as he gets older, I'll explain it to him. But I guess Luke's got a child that's a little bit older, and one, he's going to bust my balls for saying this, but we forgot this earlier. So to wish his daughter Amber a very happy belated birthday. But I'll kick it to Luke and kind of wonder, with her being where she's at and, getting ready to be commissioned and this and that, has she brought that stuff up, or does she ever question like, hey, Dad, talk about 9/11? Because for like my kids, I mean, they weren't even born yet. One of them, I mean, he just knows what he's seen on TV. Yours a little bit older. Has she hit you up about that? Like, hey, Dad, what do you really think about this?
Well, first of all, thanks for saying that, because I'm the worst. I love her to death. She's the greatest thing that ever happened to me, but I probably would have forgotten to say it. Like we had discussed, I probably would have forgotten to say it. So thank you, Roger, for making sure I'm fulfilling my fatherly duties. Happy birthday, Amber. So yeah, she has never, her mother and I are pretty patriotic, good red-blooded Americans. So she's never really questioned that. She questions some of the foreign policy decisions that the United States has made over the years. And, they're decent questions, but she's never raised that particular conspiracy theory at all. But, with the younger kids where 9/11 is more like a movie, that's a movie to them. If they weren't born, it just doesn't, it's just, that's just something that happened. I could see them questioning it. Absolutely. And I'm with Josh, man. Everything he said, I'm 100% agreement. From the United States government is not competent enough to execute something like that, and right to the very end. So the soapbox, I'm glad you went on that, Josh. And one of the big things with these, when you get to the JFK type assassinations, 9/11, all these massive programs. We've discussed this, the three of us. It's like, you can't keep that many people quiet. Hey, wake up. I mean, I know movies are cool and everything, but to execute an operation takes a lot of people, support people, operators, everything. You cannot keep that many people quiet, especially something about killing 3,000 Americans. It cannot be done. So, even with the Nixon thing, with Watergate, you had Deep Throat and all that. That guy came forward. And that was, that was a big deal, but relatively minor compared to like 9/11 or JFK assassination. So, yeah, that was a really roundabout way of answering Roger's question. But I think that if she did ask the question, there might be some wall-to-wall counseling, because she didn't come up right if that's the case.
Oh, too funny. So on that news, talking about, conspiracy theories. So QAnon, and this was brought up by one of our close friends, Dave, and he's like, hey, you got to check this thing out, man. And he's actually going on a pretty good rant. And a lot of it, I believe in it, right? I'm just like, okay. And I get to hear him out, and it's just, he's vomiting, all just stuff everywhere. I'm like, all right, let me get into this thing, because he's really spun up about it. And, QAnon is, if you're not familiar with it, I'm not an expert, but, it's along the 4chan, 8chan, and it's a lot of the far right, conspiracy theories that, Trump is here to fight, the deep state, and, fighting, the Democrats and pedophilia ring that's going on around the world and this and that. So with that, it was kind of funny, because as I was gurgling some stuff yesterday, trying to get some material for this, baby QAnon was just arrested. So I sit in there and I read, I'm like, okay, who's this baby QAnon? So I guess he's like one of the founders or whatever, 29-year-old Austin Steinberg. He was arrested, I think it was yesterday. But then you get down into this, and his whole thing was, I can never be arrested because, I secretly am an intelligence agent for President Trump, and I can get away with anything. So anyway, so they go arrest him. But then you read down into this. I mean, it's like, hey, Steinbart's arrest marks. Just the latest time, the QAnon believer has been charged with a crime. Two others have been charged with murder, including one accused of murdering the head of the Gambino crime family. So, yeah, I was a little shocked. I didn't have necessarily the time to go into it, but then it goes on to, conspiracy theories also resurface in 2 child kidnapping plots and a 2018 terrorist incident near the Hoover Dam. So for anybody that's interested in QAnon or follows that, it looks like it was at least a victory for a little bit of law enforcement with QAnon's arrest. But and I think you just sent us a text, Luke. So you want to get into your 4D chess?
No, I want to save that. I'm going to let Josh close out with that. But yeah, I'm going to let Josh close out with that toward the end, because that's the best one of them all. But yeah, so real quick, now we're going off the rails, because we had this plan, and Josh had this plan. We all kind of put our heads together. It's like, this is the plan we're going to do for the format, and we're going off the rails here. That's partially my fault. So let me ask you this, somewhat conspiracy theory related. What the fuck happened to Eric Ciamarella? Where is that dude now?
Oh man, that dude's hanging out with Colonel Vindman. I think he handing out basketballs at the gym at Fort Myers or something, bro. Like Eric Ciamarella, dude, he bounced, man. He came in, he did his thing, and then he bounced. He's hanging out, like I said, man. Him and Vindman's twin brother handing out basketballs at the gym at Fort Myers.
If I did, God dang, this is what just kills me. And maybe it's just because I'm unlucky or just not, but he's a GS-13, I think. I'm a GS-13. If I'd have done something like that, I'd have been fired so fast your head would spin. I mean, are you kidding me? If I did anything like that, even for, the popular movement, like he did it for the popular movement. But if I did something like that, I'd be gone. My boss, I guarantee he's listening to this right now. He's like, yep, he's nodding his head. Yep, he could be fucking out on his ass. So I don't know. I derailed it with the Eric Ciamarella thing, but however you pronounce his name, but something Roger said brought that to mind. It's just, man, that little weasel. I'm telling you,
Well,
yeah, Josh,
cycle,
somebody,
you get that flash in the pan, right? You make that, we saw it with the Kavanaugh hearings and Gorsuch and everything else. It's that flash in the pan, but nobody ever runs that stuff into the ground. And I think, as you get into some of the Trump thing and kind of kicking it back to Josh so we can get into his spiel about it. But, when you're talking about manipulating the media and manipulating the people, and again, going back to Robert's question, you don't necessarily have to be true, right? You just got to get the headline. You get the headline because that's what people are going to grasp. You kick that out on a Monday, right? So you kick it out on Monday. So people come in, Monday morning, and what do? They grab their cup of coffee. Hey, how was the weekend? And boom, you're right in the middle of the news cycle. And then you start to filter the information out, and you bring in other facts or fiction or whatever. And then by Friday, you find out that, hey, this isn't true. But who gives a shit on Friday? Because Friday, man, like today, this is, well, I guess it's tomorrow. Shit. Tomorrow's going to be fuck yeah Friday, man. Come like 10, 11 o'clock, it's going to be, whiskey in the hand. I'm looking at the weekend. So, and that's how the news cycle operates. And when you look at, controlling the media, I don't think that there's this big, group or machine that controls it. It's just they all know. It's like, hey, this is how the news cycle operates. This is how we as people operate, right? Because my goal is to get everything done by the end of today. So tomorrow I don't have to do jack and roll right into my weekend. And so I think that's what they do.
And it's a for-profit company. It's a for-profit venture. So going back to Robert's thing, we always got to remember that all of this is for profit, is for ratings, So go ahead, Josh, cut you off.
Except for this podcast, because we don't make any money, just to let you know.
No, not yet. Not yet. Joe Rogan, here we come.
No, you're absolutely right about the media, and they don't need to be right. All they need to have is 240 characters, and people are going to see that, and people are going to scroll on by because technology has created that, right? We got rid of, the newspaper, the hard copy newspaper. I remember every morning going down and getting the newspaper. And when I got home from school, I would sit down and read the newspaper. I had it. It was in my hand. It was actual, it was news. And then, like you said, at the beginning, Roger, like you sat down and, growing up in North Florida, like the local news was at 6 with Frank Ranneke, in Tallahassee. And then you had Dan Rather at 6:30, man. Like that was, and that was that. But now, people have their, they have their 5G device in their hand, giving them coronavirus, and they're reading their 240 characters on the, in the Twitter sphere. And so they're like, oh, look, there's 240 characters from, some celebrity who doesn't know shit about shit, and they're like, this is how this country should be dealt with on foreign policy. Even though they don't know shit about foreign policy, and people are like, you know what? You're right. You're so smart. I should definitely listen to you. And then they hit retweet and they're on to the next tweet. Right. And so, but that's the society we live in. And that's the society that we've grown up with. Our kids are growing up with rather. And it's absolutely, absolutely insane. It was funny though. Somebody came out the other day and said, they were like, he did it. That crazy son of a bitch did it. And I was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, Trump got Mexico to close the border. And I was like, what? And so I had to go and look it up. And Mexico legit closed their border with the U.S. They didn't want anybody coming back in because they didn't want they don't want COVID-19 any more than we do. And so it was like somebody brought up, they're like, it was 4D chess. Like Trump literally introduced the coronavirus into the world to get Mexico to close their border. And they're like, he did it. He finally did it. And I was like, okay, all right. You had me there for a minute, and then you kind of lost me, or Orange Man bad. But it's, it's crazy, right? Mexico finally closed their border, and that's what he wanted all along. Close the border, we'll build the wall. It's absolutely insane. But going back to the original question at the beginning. use multiple sources. Be careful what the sources that you're using. Take a look at them. Just do your due diligence. Just be intelligent. Don't take what is said to you on any news media. Because our media, by and large, on both sides, sucks, because the media should not be on one side or the other. The media should just present facts and let us decide. But we don't have that anymore, unfortunately. So. Hey, I'm gonna pass it back over to you guys for some closing thoughts. 60 seconds. Roger, Luke, you're up.
So closing thoughts with the conspiracy theory thing. I actually think we could probably do a couple more episodes on this down the line. So if people are interested, let us know, because we touched on it, but I think we could really go in depth. With conspiracy theories, my philosophy is, the kernel of truth is always there, and people are looking for an explanation to understand their lives and the world around them, so that they feel in control. You're going to hear a lot about that from me. People want to feel in control in their heart. So when you hear something that doesn't make any sense, 9/11, it doesn't make any sense. What's the explanation? How do I square this with my interpretation of reality? And when the simplest explanation, the Occam's razor explanation, doesn't make sense, which is, hey, we just screwed up. The United States, the most powerful country that's ever existed on the face of the earth, we screwed up. We weren't looking in the right place. That is not an acceptable answer for a lot of people. So they start like JFK. That's just not an acceptable answer, that one crazy guy decided to take him out, and it happened to be a really good shot and probably pretty lucky. That is not an acceptable explanation. So I think a lot of people start to inject things into that because it helps them understand it. Even though it's wrong, I think it's human nature to actually do that with respect to conspiracy theories. So that's kind of my thought on conspiracy theories. I'd love to discuss it more in the future. But for now, I'll kick it back to Roger in Apache Junction, Arizona.
Yeah, a couple towns over. Thanks. So, not all of us grew up in the posh neighborhood of Glendale that Luke was so fortunate to grow up in. But I had this whole thing about the coronavirus and the conspiracy theory as far as how it was created and this and that. And be quite honest with you, man, I'm like corona'd out. I'm done with the coronavirus. I'm done with COVID-19. People are going nuts, I can tell, because one, EMFers need jobs, all right? Because I will tell you, my Facebook Messenger goes off like there is no tomorrow. I get more stinking videos and TikTok videos and stupid shit on my phone. I'm like, hey, man, some of us actually still work. So, I need this thing to be over with so people can go back. And second, kind of going to, I think it was either first or second episode, I talked about people and their ability to, they fall back to hoarding. I just have one plea for all of Luke's fans and folks out in Glendale and his family. Whoever's buying all the tofu, so if you could just leave like 2 or 3 of those things for me, that'd be great. Normally you go in and there's like 40 pounds of this stuff. You can't, you never run out of this stuff. So we have moved now out here in Arizona from, toilet paper to baby wipes to eggs, to milk, to charcoal, and now we're on to tofu. So if you could leave a couple on the shelf for me, that would be great. So with that, Josh, some of your closing thoughts, man.
Yeah, so I kind of covered mine. Just do your due diligence, be smart, be intelligent. Don't let others, dictate your decisions. You take it, you be an adult, make your own decisions. The earth is not flat. Vaccinate your kids. And the U.S. government did not perpetrate 9/11. So closing out, hey, we want to give a couple of shout outs. So one of the things that we want to do here is we know that it's really tough right now for small businesses. And small businesses are the absolute backbone of the U.S. economy. There's a lot of people we each know people personally who have lost their livelihood right now due to the quarantine restrictions and the government deciding that they're not essential. Even though that their creditors, deem them essential. So one of the things that we want to do, whether you're a veteran small business or whether you're, a regular small business, we want to advocate for you here. So the first business that we're going to promote is Happy Balls, Kentucky Bourbon Balls Company. All right. They're headquartered out of Kentucky, the bourbon capital of the world. Bourbon is uniquely American, as is the Happy Balls Company, right? So head on over to their website, www.gethappyballs.com. Check out their Kentucky Bourbon Balls, the chocolate. I'm a fat kid. I love my chocolate. I love my bourbon. So it's the perfect combination. If you mention that you heard it on Culpers Canteen Cup podcast, you'll receive a free pair of their Kentucky bourbon balls. All right, so head on over, help them out, support them, get out, support the small businesses in your community. We really appreciate it. Make sure you check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on, make sure you subscribe or follow us. And lastly, just to make sure that we cover this, everyone here at Culpers Canteen Cup and behind the scenes wishes Amber a very happy belated birthday. All right, folks, stay safe and stay frosty.